The ocean roared like it was alive, swallowing every sound except its own fury. Aidan gripped the wheel of the rescue boat, his arms rigid as the vessel pitched violently with each wave. Wind shrieked through the fog, slapping his face with sea. Spray so cold it burned. The boat groaned beneath him, metal trembling, but he didn't flinch. The sky was pitch, save for quick lashes of lightning that revealed a shifting graveyard of water. His crew clung to their posts, silent but tense, no chatter. No jokes, they knew the stakes. Off the starboard bow, a jagged reef waited just beneath the surface, eager to gut anything that wandered too close. Another wave crashed, bigger this time, crashing over the bow and flooding the deck for a heartbeat. Aidan's boots slipped, but his hands didn't leave the wheel. He gritted his teeth and leaned into the storm. This was where he felt most himself, in the dark, with no space to think about anything but the moment. That was all he had left now. The moment and the mission. Some people run from storms. Aidan didn't, not anymore. Ever since she died, the world had blurred at the edges. His days were mechanical, his nights were heavy, but storms, they were sharp. Storms demanded presence. They gave no room for mourning or memories, only movement, only instinct. Maybe that's why he volunteered for the most dangerous missions. Maybe that's why his commander no longer asked him to take time off. No one dared bring up her name, not at the station, not in the silence that followed each mission. Aidan didn't bring it up either. He'd stopped asking questions about fate, about fairness, about what the point was. The ocean didn't care, so he didn't either. He just kept showing up. Let the storm sort out the rest. The radio crackled, faint beneath the howling wind. Then, through static, capsized, ... to aboard, ... child, ... off Blackstone Reef, ... Aidan's spine stiffened. The coordinates were less than a mile out, right where the reef split into deeper water. Dangerous terrain, especially in weather like this. He pressed the mic. Copy that, en route. He turned the wheel with precision, and the boat adjusted course without hesitation. Behind him, the crew snapped into action. Gear was secured. Lines were checked. This was routine, but every rescue had its unknowns. The mention of a child added urgency to every movement on board. Aidan's jaw clenched. He couldn't save her, not his wife. But tonight, maybe he could save someone else's daughter. Maybe that would mean something. Maybe it wouldn't. He didn't linger on the thought. The reef was near, and they were running out of time. The boat cut through the waves like a ghost, invisible to the world around it. Every console light glowed green, each beep syncing with Aidan's breath. His hands gripped the wheel with mechanical calm, but inside, memories pressed against his ribs like rising water. He could still see her, his wife, standing barefoot in their kitchen. Wind-chapped cheeks, salt still tangled in her hair from a walk along the shore. She had always loved the sea. He hated that about her now. Aidan forced the image away, focusing on the radar. Blips danced in and out of signal. The GPS jittered, threatened by the storm's interference. But the coordinates held steady. Somewhere out there, a father and daughter were waiting. Or drowning, he tapped the throttle, pushing the boat faster. His crew said nothing. They knew when not to ask. The reef appeared first, black teeth jutting from the ocean like broken bones. Aidan slowed the boat, scanning for signs of the wreck. Then, through the fog, something shifted. "Starboard," he called out. A pale object bobbed on the waves. Not a boat, not debris. Something darker beneath it, thrashing, struggling. He squinted. The lightning struck again. And in that flash, he saw it clearly, a shape. Fur, paws. Not a seal, a dog. A German shepherd, half submerged, paddling against the tide with everything it had left. What the hell? One of the crew whispered. Aidan didn't wait. His voice cut through the rain. Hold position. His heart punched his ribs. This wasn't the rescue they came for, but something about those eyes, wide and wild in the water, locked onto his dot. This was something else. Something alive. Something fighting. Something meant to be found. The boat rocked sharply as Aidan narrowed his eyes toward the frothing water. A shattered hull bobbed in the distance, clearly the wreck they were sent to find. But something else caught his attention first. There, to the left of the reef, struggling against the tide, was a figure that didn't belong to the wreck. Not a person, not debris. A dog, a large German shepherd, soaked to the bone, paddled furiously. Waves tossed him like a rag doll, but he kept swimming, determined, panicked, refusing to give up. Aidan's stomach twisted. That's not from the call. One of the crew said behind him. I see it, Aidan muttered. The mission was clear. Prioritize the family. Prioritize the wreck. But the dog wasn't giving up, and Aidan couldn't look away. For a moment, everything fell quiet. The storm, the wind, the orders. It was just that dog, fighting like hell to stay above water. Aidan's hand tightened on the railing, and his heart unexplainably leaned toward the dog. Hold position, Aidan barked, jolting the crew to action. The engines groaned as the boat adjusted course, easing toward the shepherd thrashing in the current. Aidan. We've got people in the water, his crewmate reminded him over the wind. We don't know where the kid is yet. I know, Aidan said, eyes fixed on the dog. We're not leaving this one behind either. The crew exchanged glances, but didn't argue. They trusted him even when he went off script. The dog's ears were pinned flat, his legs churning just to stay above water. His eyes met Aidan's for a flash, and that was it. They weren't wild. They were pleading. Aidan had seen that look before, not on an animal, on people, on those who'd seen too much. He grabbed a lifeline, tying it off fast. I'm going in closer, he shouted. No one stopped him. Even the ocean seemed to hesitate for just a breath, waiting to see what Aidan would do next. Aidan knelt at the edge of the slick, swaying deck. One knee braced hard against a bolt as the boat rocked beneath him. He stretched out his arm, palm open. Come on, buddy, just a bit closer, he called, voice low but steady. The shepherd was barely a few feet away, but those feet were a battlefield. The dog hesitated, muzzle dipping beneath the water before surfacing again with a gasp. He looked torn, half wild from fear, half frozen from the sea, but something in Aidan's voice stilled his panic. Aidan leaned further, soaking his sleeves, muscles straining. You've made it this far. Don't quit now. The dog whimpered, a sound raw and human. Then suddenly he kicked forward. One last, desperate push. Aidan lunged, gripping the scruff of his neck just as another wave slammed against the boat. He held on, wouldn't let go. With help from a crew member, they hauled the dog up and over. He collapsed onto the deck like a sandbag, legs twitching, alive. Barely that the shepherd didn't move. He lay in a trembling heap, sides heaving, soaked fur clinging to every bone. Water pooled around him. His ears stayed flat, and his eyes never blinked. Aidan crouched beside him, breath heavy, unsure why he felt like he'd just pulled a person from the sea. He reached out slowly. The dog didn't flinch, didn't growl, just lay there silent, as if the waves had drowned every bark from his chest. "You're safe now," Aidan whispered, not sure if it was for the dog or himself. The shepherd lifted his head slightly. Those deep, amber eyes locked on Aidan's. There was something behind them, something lost, something waiting. It struck Aidan hard. This wasn't just a dog that got pulled under. This was a soul that had nearly been swallowed whole, and he'd fought to stay afloat later. After the family was rescued and the child safely airlifted, Aidan turned his attention back to the shepherd. He checked the collar water-worn leather. No tag, no chip, no ID, he radioed in the report. Unclaimed, unknown. No one was looking for him. The shepherd sat quietly by the heating vent inside the boat's cabin, steam rising from his back. Still not a sound. Just those eyes that tracked Aidan's every move, watching, waiting, like he expected to be told to leave. Nothing on him. One of the crew asked. "Nothing but that look," Aidan replied, kneeling to offer a towel. The dog didn't resist. He just let Aidan dry him off, eyes never leaving the man's face. It felt less like a rescue and more like a meeting that was supposed to happen when the boat docked. Protocols said to call animal control. Instead, Aidan carried the shepherd in his arms, wrapped in a towel. "Let them know I'm taking him in for now," he told the crew. They didn't argue. He walked the dog through the darkened harbour, water still dripping from his boots. Unsure what he was doing, just certain it felt like the only right thing. He should have let go, left it at that, but he didn't. The dog never once looked away that night. The station was quiet. Aidan sat at his locker, boots off, towel draped around his shoulders. The shepherd lay curled beside him, damp, breathing slow, finally asleep. Aidan stared down, watching the dog's ribs rise and fall. "You're not just a stray," he murmured. "You've seen something, haven't you?" The dog didn't stir. A name floated into Aidan's mind, soft and sudden. It felt right, like it had always belonged to him. "Shadow," he whispered. The dog opened one eye, just for a second, then rested again, closer this time. Aidan poured a bowl of water and set it beside the old wool blanket he'd thrown on the station floor. One night, he told himself as he knelt beside Shadow, "You'll be on your way tomorrow." The dog didn't move, just lifted his head, slightly before letting it fall again. His breathing was slow, shallow, but steady. Aidan stood, rubbing the back of his neck. He didn't know why he felt so, uncertain. He'd taken strays to the shelter before, helped dozens of animals off the boats, soaked and trembling. But this one had stayed quiet. Still, present. Shadow curled into the blanket, one eye half open, facing the door. Guarding it, Aidan sat on the edge of the cot, boots still on. He stared at the ceiling. It was supposed to be one night, but in his chest quiet and inconvenient hope stirred. Hope that maybe this wouldn't end in the morning. The next few days, Shadow never quite settled. He followed Aidan from room to room, never barking, never whining, just pacing, ears twitching at every creak, eyes scanning corners. He jumped at the door's opening, flinching when someone laughed too loud down the hall. Aidan noticed the tremors in his paws when thunder rolled in, and how Shadow wouldn't eat unless Aidan was near. "You've seen things too, haven't you?" Aidan said one evening, setting down a dish of food. Shadow sniffed it, then looked up not with suspicion, but sorrow. He reminded Aiden of a soldier home from war, body intact, soul still adrift. No one had claimed him, no microchip, no name. But his fear wasn't wild, it was remembered. It was the fear of someone who'd once belonged somewhere and had been torn away. Aiden didn't ask questions. He just sat near the door, reading while Shadow lay close by, always within sight. It started with habit. Coffee at 5:30 a.m., black. No sugar. Same as always. But now there were 2 mugs on the counter, one for Aiden. One he'd fill with warm broth for Shadow. They'd walk along the edge of the shoreline before the town was awake. Just the sound of the sea gulls in the distance, and the soft crunch of boots and paws on wet gravel. Shadow stayed close, always close. Aiden didn't leash him, didn't need to. He talked sometimes about the wind, the tide, his wife's favorite bench along the boardwalk. Shadow didn't answer, of course, but he listened. There was something about that quiet, those soft routines that smoothed out the roughness in both of them. Aiden's shoulders didn't feel so tight anymore, and Shadow, for the first time, started sleeping without the door in his line of sight. Mornings became moments of peace. Neither of them knew they were missing. It was during one of those walks, curling off the bay, a seal barking somewhere far off, that it happened. Aiden knelt to adjust his boot, muttering to himself, "Guess the ocean finally ate this pair." And behind him, a soft thump broke the silence. Shadow's tail, just once. A quiet flick against the gravel. Aiden turned, eyes wide. Was that for me? Shadow looked away, ears twitching in mild embarrassment, but the tail moved again, tentative testing. Aiden didn't reach out, didn't press. He just smiled. Guess that counts as progress. It was small, barely a gesture, but for a dog who hadn't made a single sound since the rescue, it felt like a breakthrough loud enough to echo across the docks. The storm came in fast that night. Winds howled, rattling the window panes like fists. Rain slapped the siding. Thunder cracked so loud it pulled Aiden from sleep. Heart pounding, soaked in sweat, he gasped. Sitting upright on the cot, memories of another storm, another night. The night he lost her. He pressed a hand to his chest, trying to breathe, trying not to fall back into the spiral. Then he felt its soft weight, steady and real. Shadow had jumped up beside him. One paw rested over Aiden's heart. His head rested near his ribs. The dog didn't move, didn't demand anything. He just stayed. Aiden lay back slowly, chest rising and falling beneath Shadow's quiet presence. Neither of them slept much after that, but neither of them felt alone either. Weeks passed, routines settled. The silence between them turned gentle, not empty. Then came the late-night patrol. The docks were slick with rain, the sky a blanket of black. Aiden clipped on his flashlight, whistling for Shadow. "Let's go," he said simply. Shadow followed, no hesitation. They walked the perimeter, checking moorings and warehouse doors. The rain thickened into a downpour. Thunder cracked again. Aiden paused, half expecting Shadow to flinch, maybe bolt, but the dog only pressed closer, brushing against Aiden's leg. He trembled, but stayed. "You're braver than you know," Aiden murmured, reaching down to scratch. Behind his ears, Shadow looked up. Those eyes so haunted before now held something softer, steady. Aiden kept walking, water pooling in his boots. Shadow didn't leave his side. That night, soaked and shivering under a flickering dock light. Aidan realized something had shifted. Shadow wasn't following him anymore. He was walking with him. The days grew lighter. The weight on Aidan's chest not gone, but gentler. He laughed more, sometimes at nothing, sometimes the way Shadow sat too straight when food was near, or how he grunted when he wanted attention but wouldn't beg for it. Shadow, in turn, started, snoring softly in his sleep, belly up on Aidan's floor like he finally understood the danger had passed. Co-workers noticed. "You've changed," one said, pouring coffee. "You smile now." Aidan didn't answer right away. He just glanced down at Shadow, who lay stretched beside his boots, tail tapping faintly against the floor. Healing wasn't a word either of them used, but in the quiet, it was happening anyway. It was after a shift over lukewarm coffee that the first ripple hit. "Someone's been asking around," a co-worker said. "Vacationer lost a shepherd near the cliffs last month." Aidan froze. "You see the photo?" The man nodded, sliding his phone across the table. Aidan stared at it. Same eyes, same fur. That notch in the left ear dash, identical shadow. He felt his stomach tighten. The air thinned. "That's your dog, isn't it?" The co-worker asked gently. Aidan didn't speak, just looked toward the window, where Shadow sat outside in the patrol truck waiting patiently. Like always, suddenly, the station didn't feel as warm as it had that morning. The drive home was quiet. Shadow sat in the back seat, eyes closed, unaware of the weight in the air. Aidan gripped the wheel harder than usual. His jaw clenched. The idea had lived somewhere in the back of his mind all along, that this wasn't forever, that someone might come, that maybe Shadow was only passing through, but now it felt real, and it hurt more than he expected. At home, Shadow trotted up the stairs and sat at the door waiting, loyal, trusting. Aidan stared at him. He thought of that first night, the silence, the shaking, the way the dog had laid at his feet without asking for anything. Now, the silence was heavier. "I'm not ready," Aidan whispered, but he knew life rarely waited for permission. Aidan's fingers hovered over the phone screen. The photo of the missing German shepherd, still glowing faintly in the dim light of the station office. He had promised himself he'd call first thing in the morning, just to ask, to find out if Shadow's real owner was waiting, worried somewhere out there. But then the sky turned black again. The wind tore through the windows like a scream. His radio crackled sharply, a desperate voice breaking through the static. "Mayday. Vessel in. Distress. Coordinates incoming." The storm was back faster and fiercer than before. Aidan closed his eyes briefly, the weight of the moment crushing him. There would be no calls, no questions. Duty was louder than his heart tonight. Aidan grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Shadow was there, eyes wide, muscles coiled, before Aidan could stop him. The dog bolted after him, paws pounding the stairs with a determination that left no doubt. On the dock, the rescue boat rocked violently beneath the growing gale. Without hesitation, Shadow leaped aboard. Aidan watched, heart caught in his throat. This was no longer a dog waiting to be saved. This was a partner, a companion. Shadow's silent message was clear. He belonged here, with Aidan, through the storm, the chaos, and whatever came next. The sea was a furious beast. Lightning etched sharp lines across the sky as the rescue vessel pushed forward, carving through towering waves. Suddenly, a monstrous swell rose like a wall taller than anything Aidan had ever seen. Time slowed as the waves slammed into the boat. shattering the calm. Aiden barely had time to brace before he saw Shadow, caught in the blur of white foam, tumbling toward the edge. The dog's eyes met Aiden's wide, terrified, desperate. Then, with a powerful crash, the wave swept Shadow off the deck and into the freezing, merciless ocean. The roar of water swallowed everything. No, Aiden shouted, lunging toward the spot where Shadow disappeared beneath the frothy waves. He dove headfirst into the icy water, lungs burning, heart pounding. The ocean was a living nightmare, pulling and twisting. A dark tunnel of cold and fury screamed Shadow's name over and over. But the dog was gone beneath the violent surface. He fought the current, struggling against the sea's cruel grip. The salt stung his eyes. His body screamed for air. Moments stretched into eternity as he clawed upward, breaking the surface, gasping and coughing. The rescue team shouted, flashing lights bobbing in the storm. But Shadow was nowhere to be seen. Hours passed like a nightmare. Without end, the crew finally called off the search, their faces pale with exhaustion and defeat. But Aiden didn't move. He sat on the dock, soaked through and shivering, staring into the fog-shrouded horizon. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Shadow, come back, please." The cold seeped into his bones, but he refused to leave. His mind replayed every moment, the dog's eyes, the leap, the wave. How could he let go? How could he say goodbye? His world felt hollow, a silence so deep it threatened to swallow him whole. Yet somewhere beneath the crushing weight of despair, a stubborn flicker of hope refused to die. Just as the darkness seemed endless, a movement caught Aiden's eye, a faint, fragile shadow drifting against the tide. He squinted through the thick fog and the rain, heart pounding louder than the waves. They're clinging desperately to a buoy. Barely above the waterline was Shadow. His coat was matted and trembling, his breath shallow but steady. Aiden's breath hitched, tears mixing with rain as he shouted, "Hold on, buddy, I'm coming." The dock felt miles away as he raced to the smaller rescue craft, every second stretching like a lifetime. This time, there would be no waiting, no hesitation. Shadow was still alive, and Aiden wasn't letting go again without a word. Aiden pushed off in the smaller boat, engine roaring against the storm's fury. The spray hit his face like needles, but he didn't falter. He aimed straight for Shadow, who hung there like a ghost, weak but alive, reaching out with trembling arms. Aiden pulled the shivering dog aboard, wrapping him in his own soaked coat. Shadow's eyes met his, wide and trusting, and Aiden felt the crushing relief wash through him. They were both broken, wounded by the sea and the storm, but alive. No promises had been made, but in that moment, an unspoken vow sealed itself between them. Neither would ever let the other go. That night, the fire crackled low in the station's small kitchen. Aiden held Shadow close, feeling the dog's heartbeat slow against his chest. For a brief moment, the world outside stopped raging, but then the phone rang. Aiden's breath caught. The voice on the other end was cold, hesitant, but unmistakably claiming ownership. "I want him back," the man said. Aiden's fingers tightened around Shadow's collar. The warmth between them flickered, threatened to burn out. He had saved Shadow from the sea, but now he faced the possibility of losing him again. Aiden listened in silence as the man's voice cracked. Shadow hadn't run away by choice. He was beaten, locked up, and desperate for freedom. "I never wanted him to go," the man admitted, voice heavy with regret. "I just needed closure." Aidan felt the weight shift, the knot in his chest loosen. This wasn't just about ownership, it was about healing. Shadow wasn't a lost possession, he was a survivor, and now, maybe with Aidan, he could find a home that meant more than a name or a past. Aidan's hand trembled just a little as he held the pen over the adoption papers, but this time the uncertainty was gone. He looked down at Shadow, curled peacefully beside him, eyes closed, breathing steady after the long storm they had weathered. Together, this is it, Aidan thought quietly. Signing those papers wasn't just ink on paper. It was a promise. A declaration Shadow was his no longer a rescued dog or a mystery lost at sea, but his partner, his family. His heart was steady now, his grip firm. For the first time in months, Aidan felt whole. The storm was behind them, and whatever came next, they would face it side by side, together, forever. The next morning, Aidan stood at the Coast Guard base with Shadow by his side. The morning sun casting soft light on their new beginning. Training was hard, long hours of commands, scent work and discipline, but Shadow took to it like a natural. Each bark, each alert, each wag of his tail was a step away from the past, and closer to a new purpose. Aidan watched him learn with quiet pride. This dog, once adrift and desperate, was becoming a beacon of hope for others. The duo who had faced death together were now preparing to save lives. A new mission had begun, not just survival, but service. In every training session, Aidan saw more than a dog. He saw a true partner, one who had earned his place through loyalty and courage. Months passed, and with each mission, Shadow grew steadier, more focused, no longer just a pet. Shadow was the eyes and ears at Aidan's side during every rescue. On choppy seas and dark nights, he stayed alert and calm. A silent guardian in the storm. Aidan found strength in Shadow's presence. When waves crashed and fears rose, the dog's quiet confidence became his anchor. Their bond had transformed into something unbreakable. In the dangerous dance of rescue, trust became their language. Not just a dog, not just a handler, partners, friends, who had saved each other again and again. The weight that had once pressed so heavily on Aidan's chest, the loss of his wife, the grief he carried alone, began to lift slowly. With Shadow by his side, he returned to the quiet place he had avoided for so long, his wife's grave. The first visit was hesitant, words caught in his throat, eyes misted with tears. But day by day, those visits grew steadier. Aidan found comfort in the routine, the soft rustle of leaves, Shadow's gentle presence, the warmth of the sun on his face. Pain still lingered, but it no longer ruled him. Together, they were healing. The storm inside him was finally settling into calm one afternoon. Beneath the sprawling branches of an old oak tree, Aidan sat alone with Shadow lying quietly beside him. The breeze whispered softly as if carrying the voices of the past. Aidan reached out, his fingers tracing the cool stone of the grave. "He saved me too. You know," he said softly, voice cracking. For the first time, words flowed between grief and hope. Shadow lifted his head, eyes meeting Aidan's with quiet understanding. In that moment, the silence wasn't empty, it was full of healing, love, and the quiet promise of tomorrow. Life in town began to feel warmer. Neighbors who once passed, Aidan with averted eyes, now smiled and waved. Children's laughter followed him and Shadow wherever they went. The dog, once a shadow of fear, now trotted proudly down the street, stale high, tongue lolling happily. Aidan noticed the difference to the simple greetings. The friendly nods. Shadow had become a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of second chances. Where once there was silence and solitude, now there was connection. Their story, whispered among the townsfolk, was one of survival and trust. Two souls, forever changed by a storm, now walking forward together when the sirens screamed and the winds howled. Aidan no longer faced the darkness alone, with Shadow at his side. He met every call with steady hands and steady heart. The waves could rage, the storms would come and go, but they were ready, together, no longer lost, no longer afraid, two survivors bound by trust, loyalty, and an unbreakable bond. When the sea roared, they answered not as man and dog, but as partners who would face any storm. Together, the storm that once threatened to swallow them whole became an unexpected bridge to healing. For Aidan and Shadow, each carried invisible wound scars, not visible to the eye, but deeply etched in their souls. The sea's fury mirrored the turmoil inside them, fear, loss, loneliness. Yet, through the chaos and cold, something began to change. The very storm that tried to tear them apart became the force that brought them together, forcing them to rely on one another, to fight, to survive. In that shared struggle, healing quietly arrived not as a sudden fix, but a slow, steady pulse growing stronger with every heartbeat. Sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the most profound healing. Words were often unnecessary between Aidan and Shadow. Their bond was built in silence, in moments where presence spoke louder than promises. The gentle nudge of a nose against a weary hand, the steady warmth of a breathing companion in the darkest nights, the quiet patience through restless fears. Shadow didn't need to say he trusted Aidan didn't need to say he needed Shadow. Their quiet understanding was proof that true love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, and those whispers are the loudest of all. It wasn't just the dramatic rescue that mattered, it was every small act that followed. The blanket wrapped around a shivering body, the first cautious walk along the shore, the name whispered softly, giving identity to a lost soul. Aidan's choice to stay, to not turn away, to offer space for Shadow's fears. That was compassion in its purest form. In the quiet moments, real love grew. Sometimes healing is found not in grand gestures, but in the smallest choices made with the biggest heart. Aidan had thought he was saving Shadow that day on the storm-tossed sea, but as the days passed, the truth became clear. It was Shadow who saved him, from grief, from loneliness, from the weight of loss that had nearly crushed him. Shadow's loyalty pulled Aidan back from the edge, gave him purpose when hope seems lost. In every rescue, there are two lives forever changed, two hearts bound by trust, by courage, by love, and sometimes the one who appears lost is the one who leads us home.